Newly released Pentagon footage appears to show a UFO near Saturn. Now hold that sentence because the object in the frame is 2,000 miles long, longer than the drive from Los Angeles to Chicago. Floating beside a planet so far, its light takes more than an hour to reach you. A decorated Army officer says NASA's own probes photographed it. He says it changes shape from a circle to a cigar, like it is choosing what to be. A former NASA engineer wrote a whole book claiming these things build Saturn's rings and multiply out in the dark.
And by its very nature, UFO, and I wanted to clarify that to a gentleman that was talking to me, means unidentified. So I did not know what this was. But I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, what are you going to do with this piece of information? And he said, we always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public.
I am going to walk you through every piece, the footage, the witnesses, and the one real discovery that turns this from a ghost story into something you cannot wave off. Stay with me. An object beside Saturn, and the man who swore it was real. Start with the footage everyone keeps arguing about. A long, pale shape parked near the outer edge of Saturn's rings. Measure it end to end, and you get 2,000 miles. Picture that against something you know. It is longer than the entire west coast of the United States, from the top of Washington down to the bottom of California. Now, set it next to Earth. It is not a speck. It is in the same weight class as a planet, and it is 400 miles across in the middle. Here is the detail that stops people cold. The shape does not behave. In some frames, it reads as a clean circle. In others, it stretches into a long cigar with what looks like a faint exhaust trail bleeding off one end. Round, then long, then round again. Machines do not usually do that. Rocks definitely do not. The man who put this in front of the public was not some anonymous poster. His name was Robert Dean, and he spent 41 years inside the United States Army. He worked at NATO headquarters in the 1960s. He held a high security clearance. In 1964, he wrote an assessment paper for NATO on what it would mean if we were not alone. So, when he stood up at a summit in Barcelona at 2009 and clicked a photo of this thing, the room did not laugh. He said the images came from NASA's Voyager probes, taken during their pass by Saturn in the 1980s. Let me back up, because the Voyager part is solid history. In 1977, NASA launched Voyager 2 from Cape Canaveral. It caught a planetary alignment that lines up only once every 176 years, slingshotting from world to world on a grand tour. Jupiter, Saturn, then Uranus and Neptune, places no spacecraft had ever visited. Today, Voyager 2 is more than 12 billion miles from you, still calling home. That is not a story. That happened. So the cameras were real. The mission was real. The question is what those cameras caught. Dean did not hedge. He said the object near Saturn matched Earth in size and scale. He said it measured about 2,000 miles long with a diameter near 400 miles. And then he went further than most would dare. He said it moved with intent, drifting through the rings and among the moons like it had somewhere to be. He floated the idea that it was mining the rings for raw material, pulling resources out of the most beautiful structure in our solar system. Sit with that for a second. Not a rock caught in orbit. A thing making choices. He claimed there was more than one. Elliptical craft, some close to 7,000 miles long, looping not just around Saturn, but around the Sun, Jupiter, and Uranus. All of them, he said, trailing visible exhaust. Here is the thing you have to understand about why this spread. It did not come from a magazine that prints anything. It came wrapped in real credentials, real missions, and real photographs that NASA actually took. The probes flew. A decorated officer staked his name on what they showed. That combination is hard to shrug off, even when the conclusion sounds impossible. And the timing fed it. The footage re-entered public conversation right as the Pentagon was admitting on the record that it could not explain objects in our own sky. When the government starts saying we do not know, a 2,000-mile shape near Saturn stops feeling like a joke and starts feeling like a question. I am not going to pretend that is normal. A career military man, 3 Lifetime Achievement Awards in his field, telling a crowd that something the size of a planet is alive and working in Saturn's rings. He carried that claim until he passed in 2018. He never walked it back. So that is the anomaly up close. 2,000 miles long, 400 across, shifting from circle to cigar, witnessed, photographed, and sworn to. But a claim is not proof. And every easy answer for this object falls apart fast. What it is not, one piece at a time. Let me do the thing every honest investigation has to do. Take the object and try to make it ordinary. Knock down the simple answers one by one and see what survives. Start with the obvious. Could it be a moon? Saturn has more than 100 of them, and some are huge. So size alone does not rule it out, but moons do not change shape. They do not read as a circle in one frame and a cigar in the next. Right size, wrong behavior. A moon stays a moon. Could it be a trick of the rings themselves? Saturn's rings are wide and strange, full of gaps and waves and small bodies that herd the ice into lanes. Maybe a clump caught the light just right. That holds for a smudge. It does not hold for a defined 2,000-mile shape with an exhaust trail. Right place, wrong detail. Could it be a flaw in the camera? Old probes, long exposures, cosmic rays hitting the sensor? This is the answer scientists reach for first, and it is fair. A single bright streak can be a particle, not a craft. But Dean was not pointing at one stray pixel. He described a consistent form across images. Right idea, wrong scale. So set those aside and meet the man who tried to give the object a name. His name was Norman Berggren, and his resume is the reason people listened. He worked at NASA's Ames Research Center. He worked on classified aerospace projects for Lockheed. In 1984, he published a book called Ringmakers of Saturn, and the title is The Whole Claim. He argued that enormous craft, which he called ringmakers, were building parts of Saturn's rings, not orbiting them, making them. Berggren described long cylindrical objects tucked inside the rings, with exhaust systems and features no clump of ice should have. And he did not stop at Saturn. He said the same craft worked the rings of Jupiter and Uranus, too. One planet could be a fluke. 3 starts to sound like a pattern, at least in the telling. Then he said the part that turns a mystery into something colder. He claimed these things were alive, that they were multiplying out there in the rings, reproducing, adapting, using Saturn as both a hiding place and a power source. And here is the catch. Berggren repeated these statements as recently as 2016, decades after the book, and he never softened them. So now you have 2 men with real backgrounds pointing at the same planet and saying the same impossible thing. Their evidence, though, leans on the same shaky foundation. Blurry frames from probes that flew past Saturn 40 years ago on cameras built before your phone existed. Berggren's claims sit far outside mainstream science. They lack the kind of hard support that would force a skeptic to fold. What most people do not realize is that NASA never went silent on Saturn after Voyager. It went back with a machine far better than anything Dean or Berggren ever had. And that machine saw something in the rings neither of them predicted. And the next image came from a craft that lived at Saturn for 13 years. Closer look that changes the whole picture. The machine was Cassini. NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Italian Space Agency built it together, and it reached Saturn and stayed. 13 years circling the rings, the moons, the storms. No probe has ever known a planet that well. And Cassini was there for a rare event. Once every 15 Earth years, Saturn hits its equinox. The sun lines up flat with the plane of the rings. For a short window, light hits everything sideways. And when light goes sideways, anything sticking up out of the rings throws a long shadow across them. Mission planners timed Cassini for exactly that. They wanted the shadows. On one pass during the equinox, the spacecraft caught it. A small object inside the rings, only about 25 miles long, casting a shadow stretched across the bright band of ring beside it. The body itself was tiny, maybe 1,300 feet across, but the low sunlight threw its shadow far, making something small look like something enormous. Here is why that matters. This is the whole illusion in one frame. A modest lump of ice, lit from the side, can paint a shape across the rings that looks far bigger and far stranger than it is. Stretch that effect, age the camera, blur the image, and you can see how a 2,000-mile cigar might be born from a few hundred feet of rock and a low sun. The data points to one answer for most of these sightings: not living craft, light, angle, and the strange geometry of a place where the sun only kisses the equator at noon for a few months every Saturn year. But I am not going to tie a neat bow on it and walk away. Because Cassini also found something the skeptics did not expect, and it is the part that keeps this story honest. Cassini flew through the plumes, spraying off a small moon named Enceladus. This moon is wrapped in ice, and under that ice sits a global ocean. The spacecraft tasted the spray with a dust analyzer, and in that spray it found phosphates. Not a trace. Concentrations richer than the oceans of Earth by as much as 100 times. That is not a small detail. Phosphorus builds DNA. It builds RNA. It builds the membrane around every cell in your body. It is one of the hard requirements for life as we know it. And it was found in an ocean beyond Earth for the first time, locked under the ice of a moon that breathes vapor into space. The lead scientist on that study called the discovery extraordinary. A co-investigator urged caution, and was right to. Finding an ingredient is not finding a meal. But Cassini also found methane out there, plus an odd mix of hydrogen and carbon dioxide. On Earth, that exact recipe shows up around hydrothermal vents on the deep ocean floor, where life thrives in total darkness. So here is where the two threads cross. The giant living ships near Saturn almost certainly are not real. The honest read of the footage is light and shadow and old cameras. But the search those legends were chasing, the idea that Saturn hides something alive, did not come back empty. It came back pointing at a small icy moon nobody was watching. The myth pointed at a ghost. The science pointed at a neighbor. And once you understand why people keep seeing intent near Saturn, you start noticing the same hunger closer to home. Why this was never just about Saturn. Pull back from the rings and look at the bigger shape of this. The reason a story about Saturn caught fire is that the ground underneath it shifted. The United States government stopped saying nothing. The Pentagon admitted it was holding 144 reports of objects in our own sky it could not explain. A later count put it past 500 sightings since 2004. Some had plain answers, a real chunk did not, and one of those cases has a name and a face. In 2004, a Navy commander named David Fravor was flying off the coast of Southern California with the carrier group around the USS Nimitz. Radar on a nearby ship had been tracking objects dropping from 80,000 feet to near the ocean in seconds. Fravor flew out to look. He found a small white object shaped like a tic-tac hovering over the water. No wings, no markings, no exhaust. When he moved toward it, it seemed to mirror him. Then it shot off at a speed he could not process and vanished. Seconds later, radar found it again, 60 miles away. He testified about it in front of Congress, under oath. A trained fighter pilot telling lawmakers the thing broke everything he understood about flight. Here is the part almost nobody connects. The same instinct that makes a seasoned pilot trust his own eyes over the rulebook is the instinct that made people look at a blurry Saturn frame and see a ship. We are wired to read intent into the unknown. And sometimes, off the coast of California, the unknown looks right back. If stories like this are why you keep coming back to this channel, the long journey down every strange signal in our solar system and beyond, then do yourself a favor and follow along so the next one finds you, because the pattern is the real story. A man at NATO points at Saturn. An engineer at NASA writes a book about living rings. A Navy pilot chases a tic-tac over the Pacific. An intelligence officer with 14 years on the job tells Congress there is more we are not being shown. None of them prove the others, but together they sketch one human pull. We cannot stand not knowing. And get this, the government's own task force did not just look up. It opened a category for objects that move between the air and the sea. Things that might come from our own oceans. The mystery is not only above us, we have aimed some of it straight down. So the Saturn footage was never really about Saturn. It was about a species that finally turned its best cameras on the dark and started admitting how much of it we cannot name. After the legends and the hearings, what part of this actually holds up? What we still cannot say for sure. Let me drop the drama for a minute and talk to you straight. Because you came here for a mystery, and the honest version is better than the hype. So what is solid? Voyager 2 is real, and it really did photograph Saturn in the 1980s on its grand tour. Cassini is real, and it really spent 13 years there. The equinox shadows are real, and they really can make a small object look monstrous. And the Enceladus discovery is the most solid thing in this whole story. Phosphates, methane, the chemistry of life found in an ocean under the ice of a moon. That is not a rumor. It was published in the journal Nature. Now what is smoke? The 2,000-mile living ship near Saturn does not hold up. The honest read of that footage is old cameras, low light, and long shadows, not a craft the size of a planet. Berggren's ringmakers, multiplying and feeding in the rings, sit far outside what any evidence supports. I am not telling you these men lied. Dean carried his belief for decades and never cashed it in. But conviction is not the same as proof, and a blurry frame from 40 years ago cannot carry a claim that heavy. Here is what gnaws at me, though. We are very good at the opposite mistake, too. For decades, serious people waved off the idea that any moon out here could hold life. Then Cassini flew through a plume and tasted the chemistry of a living ocean. So, which is the real error? Seeing ships that are not there, or refusing to look until a machine forces our hand? I keep coming back to one quiet fact. Every answer in this story arrived only because we built something good enough to go check. Voyager checked. Cassini checked. The next probe, headed for Saturn's moon Titan in the 2030s, will check again. We did not reason our way to the truth from a couch. We flew out and looked, and we are still missing pieces. We do not know if anything actually lives under that ice. We do not know what a handful of those Pentagon objects really were. We do not know how much footage stays locked in a drawer somewhere. Anyone who tells you they have the full picture is selling you something. So look at the real shape of it. The giant UFO near Saturn is almost certainly a ghost born of light and old lenses. But the search that ghost belonged to led us to a small icy moon with the building blocks of life in its sea. The legend was wrong. The looking was not. That might be the most unsettling part. The truth out here is stranger than the hoax, and we only found it because a few people refused to stop pointing cameras into the dark. So here is the question worth fighting over. If life's chemistry was sitting under Saturn's ice this whole time, is the government really showing us everything it found out there? Tell me below. Then like, comment, and subscribe.